walkthroughs. My name is Alan, and I'm your host. And it's my pleasure to present to you Maria, who is the founder of Applicant Lab, um, and oh, and also having connection issues. So let's see if we can get that resolved. Last time we were doing the Harvard session, and there were a little bit of connection issues there. Um, and so let's see if Maria will come back after we wait a little. If not, I'll email and see what we can then get going on. In the meantime, I'll ask a question in the poll. What year are you guys planning on applying? Maria, welcome back to welcome back to the session.
I'm just gonna keep my camera off. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I think my camera is what's blowing it. So, hi everyone, I'm back. And now let me share my screen again.
yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Alan, I don't know if you want me to just jump in or if you were saying something.
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna ask a poll. I'll ask that on the side while you're presenting, so please feel free to go ahead. Or actually one thing first. I just want to add that we're gonna open up for Q&A at towards the end of the session, hopefully around 10:40, and then to the left of the chat tab, on the left side of your chat tab, there should be a Q&A section where we'd love if you would ask questions, upvote and downvote the ones that you'd want and don't want to see, and then those are the questions that we'll be asking at the end of the session. That's it. Maria, if you'd like to go ahead, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Sorry, I don't know why my computer is incapable of walking and chewing gum at the same time, or in this case, sharing my screen and showing my face at the same time. But let's focus on the screen because that's far more useful for you to look at. All right. So here we are. We're in the Cornell application. We are just going to jump right in. So the first section is personal information. This is a pretty straightforward little section. You're just going to put your actual name. If you've had more than one name, let's say perhaps you changed it for some reason, you would put your previous name. They have different pronouns. I like to think that I'm pretty up to speed with all of this stuff, but this is one that I had not encountered before, so that's fun. Are you transgender? What is your gender? What's your sexual orientation? So for this section here, sometimes I've been asked like, oh, is there like, should I put that I'm LGBTQ even if I'm not? Because that makes me quote unquote diverse. I would not do that. Sometimes people want to try to game the system in weird little ways. But if you put something like this and it's not really true, then I will look at your resume and I'll say, great. So how many LGBTQ nonprofits have you volunteered with? How much are you leading the LGBTQ support group at your company? You're not doing any of that? Well, okay. Like, I'm not saying that you have to prove your sexual orientation, but if you are the sort of leader that a business school is looking for, and if this is a big part of your identity, it would be nice if you have something to back it up. My point is, don't lie, and don't think that like, ha ha ha, I'm going to get some sort of. It's very frustrating for someone like me to hear like, oh, let me try to game the system. If you try to game it, it's just going to come back to bite you. So are you a first generation college student? Yes or no? There's really no other place to put that, any other explanation about that. Some schools will let you explain a little bit about, well, my father's from Oaxaca and he did not graduate from high school or whatever it is, but here they're just, it's just a yes or no. So this one's pretty straightforward. Citizenship and languages. So again, like what's your main citizenship status? If you have more than one citizenship, you can put that second country there. Where were you born? Which is interesting because many times that might be different than your country of citizenship. And then is English your native language? If you put no, it doesn't. Oh, sorry. What is your native language? You can put it here. And then based on the information you reported above, do you believe you qualify for a waiver of the English language exam requirement? So basically, let's say you are from India and your native language is Bengali, or you're from Bangladesh and your native language is Bengali, then But if you attended university, like an English language speaking university, then you do not have to take the TOEFL, or the IELTS. Um, so then you can just sort of complete this field, and then here's where you explain why that is. Thankfully, so far, at least Cornell has not said that if you qualify for the English language waiver and you submitted the GMAT focus, you will also have to perhaps take an extra business writing assessment. So thankfully, there's no, we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so here your address, they want at least one physical mailing address. So if you are someone who moves around a lot, let's say, well, I'm based in Boston, but I am currently on a 6-month assignment in Namibia, whatever that might be, put at least one physical mailing address. Packages cannot be shipped to PO boxes. This is basically like if you get accepted, they'll probably send you like a, I don't know, a t-shirt or something. But so yeah, you can put as many addresses as you want. Okay. So if you want a GMAT test waiver, you have to be sort of considered for it. So basically, here's how this works. Let me zoom in on this guy. All right. So if you apply for a test waiver, this is if you think your test score is not very good and therefore you're not going to get accepted. Or if you're sort of applying and you're like, well, I haven't taken a test yet, so I'm just going to roll the dice and hope that I get this waiver. Basically what happens is in some schools, you actually have to request the test waiver in advance. Cornell is nicer about this, where you can submit your application, ask for the application then, and then they'll come back to you within, sort of a week and a half to let you know, like, yes, we've accepted the waiver, you don't have to do it, or nope, sorry, we still need to see a test score. So that's nice because you don't have to, like, sometimes people don't realize that you have to request the waiver in advance, and then they go to submit, and then it's like, oh no, I should have done this 3 weeks ago. So this is nice of Cornell to do. However, if the test waiver is not approved, you will then need to hurry up and take a test as soon as you can and hopefully do well in it, because then they will not consider your application any further beyond that. So if you're going to ask for a test waiver, have a backup plan in place to do a retake or a take of the first time of the test, realizing that the longer you wait, the more time will pass and the more other profiles are going to get evaluated. It's just in your best interest to have a backup plan ready to go. Now, if you are going to request a GMAT waiver, you get 100 words to describe why you think that is. And so the best ways to qualify for a GMAT waiver or GRE waiver is to point to really significant quantitative coursework in college where you hopefully did very, very well. So the minimums are normally you need to have a minimum of calculus and statistics. And a lot of MBA programs like to see something like microeconomics. Of course, if you were in a major like an engineering major and you weren't allowed to take microeconomics or macroeconomics, like, don't stress about it. Really, calculus is the big one, and anything sort of beyond calculus. The other thing you can point to are things like at your job, if you're doing very advanced analytical types of things, you could also point to that. That is not as strong as having taken coursework. As a side note, I should mention that the coursework does not have to be coursework that you took in college. Let's say you took calculus in college and you just didn't do very well, but you took an online calculus class last year. You can talk about that here, right? Mention that here for sure. Moving on, parent information. What's your parent's name, college degree information, current or most recent position and employer. A 200-word limit max. So God bless the people at Cornell. I kind of like that they give you this 200 words to just describe your parent / upbringing. We just finished doing the HBS session, and if you were with us for that, you see they have very constrained boxes. I understand from the perspective of if I need to go through dozens of these per day, it helps me standardize things as much as possible to sort of get a quick sense of like, okay, what's this person's background? Opening it up this way to this 200 word limit does mean that the poor reader at Cornell has to do a little bit more mental work because they actually have to pay attention to what you write here. But this could be a great place, if you were raised in a, in a household where, let's say perhaps your parents got divorced and you were raised in two different households growing up, or you were raised by a relative or a family member or something like that. Here's where you can try to get some of that information in. And then here's where you can say, I don't think everyone needs to go. Just by the way, just because they give you 200 words doesn't mean you should use up all 200 words. That would be a little bit obnoxious. Put yourself in their shoes. I think, okay, then Maria, why do they even give us 200 words? Because I think every once in a while someone does need all 200 words. Let's say they had a parent who was perhaps, I don't know, incarcerated, but then after they were incarcerated, they got a college degree while they were in jail, and then they went on to work at whatever. Like, in some cases that might be interesting to know about you, but for the most part this should be pretty straightforward, right? And put them in this order. This is not a place, even though 200 word limit might make it sound like it is a quote unquote essay. I would not say like, my father was born on a small farm. It would, like, no, I would just answer the question in the order provided. And then if you need more information about your one or both of your parents' backgrounds, then after that, I would then elaborate. If anyone attended Cornell, let us know. Do you have a significant other also submitting an application? So sometimes couples apply together. They might apply to Johnson together, or they might apply, maybe your significant other is applying to another school within Cornell. So here you can explain, it asks for their name and occupation, but you can also say, my spouse is applying for the MPH program or some other program. All right, a whole bunch of questions about, are you in the military? These are the US military usually. Are you applying for a dual degree? So here you say, yes, I'm planning on applying to the JD MBA, and then you can say, I haven't applied yet, or I'm going to apply. Um, this is interesting that it's like, what's the status of your application with the other program? And one of the options is denied. That's really funny, isn't it? Like, who would put this? I'm applying for the dual degree, but I didn't get in. Like, well, then guess what? You're not doing a dual degree. I don't know why they I don't know why they have that. Okay. Have you applied previously within the past 2 years? If so, tell us when that was, whatever it was. Okay. Here's like the first sort of tricky one that we are getting to. Oh, this is weird. I think this previous admissions decision probably belongs above this one. Oh well. What other MBA programs have you or will you apply to? So I if you go up to like a school representative at an MBA fair or at a webinar and you're like, hey, like, does what I put here have any impact or bearing whatsoever on my candidacy? They'll say, no, we're just collecting it for marketing reasons. But I don't think this is true, because if they're collecting it for marketing reasons, why don't they just ask through an anonymous survey? Why do they have it ask? Why are they asking you in the application form itself? Um, what you would put here is, I'm not saying to lie, but I am saying to be strategic. And the reason this is one of the few questions in the pantheon of questions an MBA admissions committee might ask you. This is one of the only ones where I am okay with you not lying, but because I do not believe that the question is being truly asked in good faith, right? It's not just being used for marketing reasons. If you say the other MBA programs I'm applying to are Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, and Cornell, and I'm the Cornell reader, I'm going to feel like, chopped liver, as the expression is, right? I'm going to feel like, oh, I'm clearly the safety school. And not only is that going to make me a little bit bummed out, but it's also going to make me think, do I think this person's going to get into Stanford? If so, why should I waste an acceptance on them? Because I know they're just going to turn me down, and that's a waste of my time. It makes my yield number look worse. So one of the numbers that admissions officers are not judged against, perhaps is too strong. Judge is too strong of a word, but they are very cognizant of this number called yield. And yield is the percentage of people that we gave an offer to that took us up on that offer. And if you are a very obvious yield risk, why would I waste? Well, I'm not going to waste my time. I'm not going to waste an acceptance on you. So when you put other MBA programs that you're applying to, if you're applying to some higher ranked programs, I think you can put that, but don't only put those, right? Because then they're going to feel like, oh, they're not coming here, if they get in someplace else. Uh, and then if you're going to pick other programs that are sort of at the same in the same tier as Cornell, try to pick those that are somewhat similar. So maybe like a Tuck, for example, right? Cornell is in Ithaca, upstate New York. It's not near New York City. It is pretty, a little bit isolated. So it's very similar to, say, Dartmouth, for example, Dartmouth Tuck. So then here, you could also maybe put like Columbia, NYU, and Cornell, because at least that way you've got there's like the thematic element of New York City. But what I'm saying here is don't put UCLA, USC, Berkeley, and then you guys. Because it's like, well, wait a minute. All of those other schools are in California on the opposite side of the country. So, just make sure that what other programs you put, do not only put higher ranked programs, and the other programs do not only put programs that have nothing at all that are similar to Cornell, because then I'm going to be like, wait a minute, are you serious? Like, are you actually serious about me? Have you ever been academic probation? Have you ever been accused of a crime or been guilty of a crime? Um, Hopefully you have not been. Okay. So, work experience. So, how many years of post undergraduate work experience will you have at your time of projected enrollment? If you have more than 15 years of experience, please select 15 and email us to indicate your level of experience. When I first encountered this, I thought that was kind of an odd thing to say. Well, email us. Like, why do you need to email these people? Like, I'll just see on the resume that you have 18 years of experience, right? I can do the math in my head, not always well, but I can do the math in my head. And so why do they have me email? I think why they want you to email them to indicate your level of experience is because if you've got more than 15 years, I think they're going to try to talk you out of the full-time MBA, and they're going to try to talk you into um, some other program. So I do give them props for being pretty open and honest about, normally 10 years is kind of considered to be the cutoff for a full-time MBA. They're being a little bit nicer about it. But if you're watching this, by the way, and you have 10 or 15 years of experience, it is going to be harder for you to get into a full-time 2-year MBA program. But let's just say the answer is 4. Are you affiliated with a family business? Um, if you are, describe the company. So if you do have a family business that is a sizable one, um, and if you could plausibly, like, let's say you helped your mother out when you were in college, you helped her redesign a website or something. If it's a sizable business that you have had some sort of previous help, you've been giving it some help, and or it might make for a promising employer for you one day, then definitely fill this out. And why? Because that helps me as a reader feel more comfortable that should on-campus recruiting not work out for you, you have this to fall back on. Obviously, if the company only, does not make enough money for you to be able to pay back your student loans, right? Because many people who go, if you end up going to a school like Cornell or any of these top US programs, you're probably going to graduate with about $200,000 worth of debt. Um, so if the company is really small and only makes, like, say, 10,000 US dollars a year, okay, that's not going to be enough to pay back your loans. So maybe then you don't mention it. But if it's a sizable company where I'm like, oh, phew, thank goodness, they can always fall back on this, that's going to make me as a reader feel more comfortable. So here, resume upload, they don't give you any constraints for the resume, but usually you're going to want it to be 1 page just to make their lives easier. Okay. So employment history. Let's pull this up. You're going to add your employer. So for description of the organization, 20-word limit max. For this, I would choose. I would not just say my overall organization. Here, I would actually go a little bit deeper and talk about the department I work for, what area of the organization I work in. So this is not the place to say McKinsey and Company is a global management consulting firm. Like, oh yeah, really? Is it? Thanks. No, here's where you would say instead, In the Chicago office of McKinsey, we specialize in helping Midwestern businesses, blah, blah, blah. So you could also, by the way, if you work for, say, a professional services firm where you've worked with a ton of different clients, you could also say, like, at my consulting firm, I specialize in post-merger integrations and I do them primarily in the fintech industry or whatever it might be. So if you work for a very large company, please use this space to help me locate you in my head where you are in that huge, huge company. And if you work for a smaller company, this is where you would describe what that company does, um, to help me picture what it is where it is that you're working. Um, so this has made me laugh. I thought this was a typo when this first came out. I think they changed this a year or two ago. Describe your responsibilities. 3,000 word limit max. I actually asked them. I was like, "That's a typo, right? You mean 300?" And they're like, "No, we'll give people 3,000." Just because you are given 3,000 words. 3,000 words is about, just to give you a sense, it's about 6 pages of printed text, like on a printer, right? So don't spend all 3,000 words. But however, what I would do is if we scroll down, we see describe your responsibilities, salary, company website, and why you left. Notice how some other schools give separate boxes for, say, accomplishments, challenges, things like that. In this one, you just get the one box to quote unquote describe your responsibilities. First of all, definitely do not simply copy and paste from your resume. That's very, first of all, it shows them that you do not care and you cannot be bothered to spend even 10 minutes on their form, which is not a good look for a candidate. But also, here is an opportunity for you to at least start to summarize some of your greatest professional accomplishments. I would not use this as a 3,000 word essay, but I would say something like, as the growth marketing analyst, it's my job to make sure that more people use Snapchat, or whatever it might be, right? And so I do this and this and this. Some of my biggest impact, I'm especially proud of the impact I've been able to make when I helped increase our user base by whatever, or when I did this and this and this. So this is where you can describe in sentence form, in more narrative form, some of those greatest hits that you've had in your career, some of those leadership accomplishments. Always focus on, by the way, interpersonal accomplishments and not technical brainiac IQ accomplishments. Those accomplishments are great, but that's not what I'm looking for when I'm thinking about future business leaders that I want to accept into my class, right? So if you have a story where, like, I convinced the vice president of whatever to do something different, put something like that, because that shows that you're able to persuade people over whom you have no direct authority. Or if let's say you were part of a project that had gone off the rails and you came and you're like, okay guys, we got to focus, we got to get, we need to stop fighting, we need to get work together. If that's something what you can include that detail, right? These are some of the details that will not fit on a resume. It would be a little bit weird maybe to, on a resume, say like the entire team was fighting and things were a mess and then I came in, right? You wouldn't say that on a resume, but here's where you can say something like, the team was not making progress because of conflict, so then I came in and I said blah blah blah. So I would describe maybe 2 to 3 of your greatest hits, in a couple of sentences each here, focusing again on those EQ elements. And the reason I say this is because, not to sort of jump ahead, spoiler alert to the essays, but in the essay, the real only essay is about how are you going to make an impact on the community here. Um, so you can talk about the positive impact you've made at work here, but this is a little bit more of like an extracurricular impact, right? So if you've led the young alumni community for your undergraduate college, here you can say, oh well, when I'm at Cornell, I'll do the same thing, and I'll lead the alumni community of Chicago for Cornell once I graduate from Cornell. So to the extent that there really isn't here in this application a whole lot of places for you to elaborate on some of your professional accomplishments, that's where you would put that in the employment history. Education information, these are all pretty, now we're getting to, this is a pretty straightforward one, right? You're going to put where you went, you're going to upload your transcripts, et cetera, et cetera. Now, one thing that people tend to stress out about a little bit is like the GPA. Um, Usually what happens, I would not necessarily worry about this. If it was not done on a 4.0 or 4.3 basis, do not then try to calculate like, well, mine it was done on an 8 basis or a basis of 10, and now I'm going to try to calculate what it would have been on a 4.0. You're not going to do yourself any favors. Just do the other and then put whatever your GPA actually was. Because if I get your transcript, most transcripts will have the GPA on it in whatever your local GPA scale is. And so it's just easier for me to match that up. So please describe the grading scale. What I would do here is, it's out of 10.0. And then if you did have honors, for example, because like I remember when I very, very, very first started this, helping people get into business school. I've been doing this now for 20 years. When I started at the very beginning and I first encountered an Indian candidate who had gone to IIT and their GPA was like a 7.6, and in my head I was like, oh my gosh, a 76%, that's so bad. Like, wow, your grades are your grades are really bad. And they were like, actually, I was like the third highest person in my class. So here, if that is you, if you're like, oh man, the raw, first of all, if you did go to something like an IIT or a BITS Pilani or University of Delhi, as a side note, or like a well-known university, they're gonna know at this point. They should have an intuition of what is a good, quote unquote, good GPA and what isn't. But you could say, but just in case you're worried, you could say something like, my GPA placed placed me in the top 15% of the class, right? So if you're worried about that, you could put, if you had some sort of honors, put that in the resume, but then you can also fill this out here, right? You can explain a little bit more of that here. Okay. All right, moving on to test scores. So if you're not applying for the waiver, you've got to do a test score. As with all other schools, you're going to enter it yourself, but then you're also going to attach the score report, the unofficial score report, and then if you have the TOEFL, et cetera, et cetera. I'm scanning this to see if there's anything that's like noteworthy here that is different from other schools. I don't believe there is, so I think we'll just move on. So affiliations and certifications. So this is interesting. Instead of breaking it out into like, tell us about your extracurricular activities. Okay, now tell us about some other activities. It's just, you just get 10, a maximum of 10. Just because you get 10, don't feel like you have to put in 10. I'd rather have you only have 3 things here, but have them be noteworthy, as opposed to like item number 9, I once helped a kitten cross the street. Item number 10, I once gave, a cookie to someone. Like, no. Quality over quantity, please. But then when you enter it, you can say, is it a professional? Oh, you also would put your certificate. Sorry, this is something that is different here. It's not just your extracurricular activities that go here. It's also like if you have like a CPA, some sort of certification like that, like a CPA or a CFA or one of those. Here we go. So CPA, etc. Then you have to add proof. But for most of the other ones, hold on. You would do something like a post-collegiate activity, either like, here's something I did, volunteer stuff I did in college, or volunteer stuff I have done after college. And so what I like about this one is that they give you so many more boxes. If you were with us for HBS, you'll remember they pretty much just gave you like a couple of tiny boxes where you have to squeeze in your information and 250 characters to talk about what your impact was. Here you get a more generous 100-word limit to describe what you did in this activity, and they give you so much more space to really describe, like, okay, were you an officer of the club? Yes, I was vice president. What was I the leader? Was I a founder, a volunteer? So I really like that Cornell gives us all of this extra room to really describe our extracurricular activities in more detail. This is something that I appreciate that they let us do. So this is where I would really focus on, for example, if it's something unfamous, you can always use parentheses here to say, oh, I volunteered at the House of Ruth, parentheses, Baltimore's largest domestic violence clinic, close parentheses. But normally that's a trick that I have for other schools where you don't get a lot of room, but then here it's like, ooh, you have so much room, right? So notice the difference for HBS, which it's top of mind for me because we just did it. It's 250 characters, and this is twice as much. 250 characters is roughly 50 words, 35 to 50 words. Here you get over 2 times that amount. So that is very generous. So goals and interests. So this is fun because they, if this is not your first time watching or looking at an application form, you'll know that every application form will ask on some level, what are your post-graduation goals, or what are your long-term goals, or what are both of those goals? And normally it's something like an open little text box where you can describe it, or a drop-down list. Here they have this fun thing, and they've done this for several years now, where it's kind of a fill in the blanks. So immediate post MBA, my goal is to work as a lion tamer at Amazon, the actual Amazon. Actually, I don't think there are lions in the Amazon, but and you'll see it starts to fill in. It fills in at the top. This is a very cute little. This is cute. And so this is like I like how pragmatic this is, because for those of you who have not yet attended my other webinars, it is very important that your post MBA goal on some level take advantage of something you have done in the past. So please don't actually put something crazy like lion tamer, or equally crazy private equity analyst, right? Like if you don't have private equity or banking experience, lion tamer is probably a better fit, probably a better bet in that case. So make sure that this is something that flows naturally from, on some level, that at least takes advantage of at least transferable skills, or it's at least somewhat in an industry that you already have experience in. It makes the whole application just flow a little bit more easily. And then they have the same exact thing for your target role in 5 to 10 years. This is sort of the long-term piece. Now, here you get this. You know what? I was trying to see if there's a word limit here when I was looking at this. I I don't think there is, but again, that doesn't mean go crazy. But I love this question of, how has your experience prepared and encouraged you to pursue these goals? So if you're like, Maria, I am going to put private equity, but you don't understand, on my spare time, I've been helping my uncle who runs a private equity firm. It's great. This is where you show that you have at least something, that this, especially between these two, the target 5 to 10 years and the post MBA in particular, showing me that that post MBA job will be attainable on some level. Like, oh, I spoke to 3 other management consultants who were also engineers before business school, and they said blah, like I can get this job. So here is where you're going to highlight, either if you're not applying with a big switch, you're going to highlight, okay, here's, I'm already an expert in the semiconductor industry, and so I'm just going to stay in the semiconductor industry, but now I'm going to move to the business side of things. Or if you are applying with a switch, with a job position that is more of like a switch, here's where you're going to say, like, I've spoken to 4 other people who are now doing investment banking, and they've said that my background in blah 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 will actually make me a valuable hire, because of my analytical background, my project management background, my client management background, whatever that might be, right? So here's where you kind of, I don't, I'm going to use the word, you're defending yourself. I don't want to, you should not be defensive. Like, don't be like, hey, I can totally do this. And I'm great at this. No, but I'm saying, just keep in mind that, many MBA admissions offices are down the hall from the career services office. And if they think that the career goal is one that might be a challenge to get, they will call in career services and they will say, hey, like, do you think this person is going to get that job? And if career services, no way, then you might not get in just on that basis alone. So select the Spring Immersion Learning Program and the Johnson Intensive Program. Honestly, these are just obviously you're going to pick the one that matches. You're not going to say, I want to go into investment banking, and then pick sustainable global enterprise, right? Like it needs to match. Whatever one you pick here needs to match. This is mostly Johnson marketing itself through the application. Sometimes schools use the application itself to market themselves. Um, so, for example, if you are a tech person or want to get into the tech industry, then yes, you should absolutely say that you're interested in the 1+1 program, where you spend 1 year in Ithaca and the second year in New York City on the Cornell Tech campus. So, yeah, here's where you pretty much, so what it says, like the following, please select if this is of interest to you. Again, make it consistent, but more than anything, don't stress about this. This is basically their way of marketing, like, yoo-hoo, you might not have done a lot of research into us, but did you know that we have an emerging markets institute? So I think that's part of the goal. That's part of the goal here. Because a lot of other schools won't give you these drop downs to choose from, because the idea is that they will ask you an essay and then you do the research. And then in your essay, you say, I'm going to do the Emerging Markets Institute. But I think because Cornell realizes that maybe sometimes people are applying without a ton of background knowledge about them, they're like, whoa, hey, did you know we have all this cool stuff? Because, by the way, they have a lot of really cool stuff. Goals and interests. And then, as I alluded to before, the essay, there's a reapplicant essay, which also, most schools have. I think all schools have for the most part. So it's just one essay. It's 350 words or less. At Cornell, our students and alumni share a desire to positively impact the organizations and communities they serve. Taking into consideration your background, how do you intend to make a meaningful impact on an elite MBA community? I covered this before briefly, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a week or so. But the impact on a community ideally is something that you have done that is extracurricular in nature. That's not the only thing you can talk about in this essay, but the best sort of answer here is one in which you say, well, here's something that I've done in the past, right? I helped organize an interview and resume workshop in the past for my peers, and I will do the same thing at Cornell through the consulting club or something like that. So just a heads up on that one, but we can talk more about that later. And then I think we're pretty much done. Financial aid, do you want to be considered for scholarship funding? I'm assuming that most people here would say yes. Would you like to receive finance? I love it when schools are very open in their applications about the financial aspect of it, because every year, even though, like, I don't know, it's like the third or the fourth to-do list item in Applicant Lab that I have is like, yo, think about your finances, because this degree is expensive. And yes, some people do get scholarships, hooray, but not a lot. The majority of people, like over 50% in most schools, get zero scholarship. And then even if you do get scholarship, it might be like $10,000 a year and not $50,000 a year. So this happens every year. People use Applicant Lab, they get accepted, and then they email me like, oh no, now I need to take out a student loan for $100,000. And I'm like, yes, that is the price. They're pretty open about it. So I love it when schools really have like a whole separate section where it's like, do you want financial planning information? Like, what steps have you taken to prepare financially for your MBA study? Right? So have you been saving? I several years ago when I visited Kellogg for an admissions consultants conference that they did there, they actually said that they anticipate that people will be saving 1 to 2 years. So if you are a high income earner, first of all, if you're currently a high income earner, the higher your income, the lower the chances are that you're going to get a scholarship. Um, but if you're a high income earner, their expectation is that you have been taking this process so seriously that you have been saving for a year or two. Um, or of course, obviously, if your organization is sponsoring your studies, then that helps a lot. Uh, and by the way, if you are, say, a management consultant who is sponsored, then that can be great, because now as an admissions reader, I'm not worried about like, oh gosh, are they going to qualify for the loan? Do I need to worry about giving them scholarship money? You're like, oh, good. Phew. One less thing to worry about. Nice. And then the recommendation is a standard recommendation. I think the only thing, just to quickly note, is that they will ask you, do you wish to waive your right to review this letter of recommendation? Yes, waive your right. It's a very clunky combination of words, but basically this is saying, I'm not going to come back later and ask to see what my recommender said about me. And so if you say no, that you're not going to waive your right, then it's like, oh, is my recommender, can we take this recommendation fully seriously? Or was the person, did they hold back a little because they were worried about, the candidate later on seeing what they wrote? So you're going to say yes. And that is pretty much everything. Then the honor code, all of the schools tend to have something like this. Everything is right. Yeah, hooray, it's true. So that is the application. Now I will try turning on my camera. Who knows what will happen? But in the meantime, we got like a couple more minutes. So, Alan, are there any questions that I haven't seen any of these?
Yes, there are quite a few in the question and answer tab. Reminder to those in the audience, upvote and downvote the ones that you'd like to see. Currently, we got around 150 people in the session and only 9 upvotes on the top question. So I know y'all aren't voting. Please get out and vote. So I'm going to show some questions on the stage. So the first question is, what are the pros and cons of applying in round 1 versus round 2?
Um, so the pro of applying in round 1 is that there are more seats available, and especially if you're from an overrepresented group, you're going to want to get your application in as soon as possible, because schools don't have quotas, but they do have ideas in their head of like, okay, we want X number, we want a rough number of people from this industry or that industry, this background or that background. So if a lot of people from your background are applying in round 1 and then you apply in round 2, even if you're a super strong candidate, they might say like, oh no, but we already, our microchip fabulous engineering NVIDIA types, we had like 6 spots. We sort of had roughly 6 spots for those folks. We already gave those spots away in round 1. So if all else is equal and you can submit in round 1, please do. The reasons to wait until round 2 are primarily if you need, like if your current test score is so bad that you're like, oh, it's not going to work if I submit this test score, then wait, do a retake and submit in round 2. It's better to, you're like, oh, but Maria, you just said it's really important to apply in round 1. Yeah, but if you're going to apply in round 1 with a test score that's so low that it's instant death, then that's not really worth it either, right? You have less of a shot in round 2 simply because there are fewer seats available, but at least you might give yourself a fighting chance at one of those spots if you're submitting the strongest test scores possible. The other reason you might want to push to round 2 is if you've got like this big, like 2-year long project that you've been working on and it's going to launch like October 15th or December 1st. This way, you'll be able to talk about it a little bit more in the application. Now, in the Cornell application, as we just noticed, there is not a big leadership essay. There's not a big, so for Cornell, you could consider applying in round 1, even if you've got a big project that's going to be finishing up in a couple months, because then in that box, the 3,000 word box for your responsibilities, that's where you can say, I'm currently leading a such and such project, it's going to launch in November. They are not as interested, but for the schools that have like more leadership essays, if you're like, oh, I'm going to have a great thing to talk about in November, then maybe wait until round 2.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Okay, I'm gonna mark that one as answered. Next question is, and because it's 10:46 already, this will be the final question. Um, what does Cornell look out for in candidates? As Maria previously mentioned, each school seems to look for different traits.
Yeah. So Cornell is looking for people who are really, really team focused, really more givers than takers. And we know this a couple of different ways. Number one, because their only essay question is, what is your contribution going to be to our community? Now, to be clear, your contribution could be your professional experience, right? Where you're sharing, like, here's how I launched an app that made it to the top of the App Store. And if any of my classmates are entrepreneurs, I can teach them that too. But the idea is, notice how the wording of the essay is about your contribution. How are you going to help? Not what are you going to benefit from? What are you going to take from our community? What are you going to give to our community? So they are really looking for people who are givers. And we also know that because of they, like Tuck, are in a relatively geographically isolated area. So it's not like if you go to Columbia or NYU, where if for whatever reason, like you don't like your classmates and they don't like you, whatever, it's the weekend, I'm just not going to talk to you. I'm going to go out into the city and I'm going to go to a jazz club or do whatever it is I do in New York. If you're in New Haven or if you're in Ithaca, there's not a whole lot of places to go besides Ithaca. So you're going to want to show that you're the sort of person who contributes to other people, but who can also get along with other people, especially people who are very different, because the Cornell student body is a diverse one.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maria. If you guys want to hear more from Maria, she's on Applicant Lab. One quick pro tip from me, as someone who's seen a little bit of these sessions, Cornell tends to be very generous with their waivers. For example, we had a waiver for the last GMAT Club spotlight we did. So if you attend an event, there's a high probability you can get a waiver for the Cornell application fee. And then that'll get you most of the way to paying for Applicant Lab, I believe. Is that correct, Maria?
It sure does. Thanks, Alan. Thanks for that. Thanks for setting that up. Yes, Applicant Lab, it's all of my advice, 20 years of experience, but for less of the cost of 1 hour of traditional admissions consulting, please do check it out. But yeah, great point on the fee waiver. You can get one.
Thanks so much, everyone, and hope to see you guys in a future session.
Thank you.